Welcome back, Tangerinis. In this video, I'm going to be doing some myth busting on real estate in Mexico and share some tips with you to help keep you from getting screwed on your next Mexico real estate transaction. About a year ago, we did a video on why expats leave Mexico. To start that video off, we said one of the reasons why expats leave Mexico is because they got screwed over by property rights and they had their home stolen from them. There's quite a few examples of this. And in Rolled the Comments, we got literally hundreds of comments saying one of two things. One, it's illegal for foreigners to own property in Mexico. Or two, basically you're an idiot for buying property in a foreign country, and if you want to live in Mexico, to always rent. So in this video, I'm going to address these two common misconceptions, as well as many other tips about buying property here in this country. So are you an idiot for buying property in Mexico? I don't think so. I think there's a lot of good reasons for it. I think it's great to have international diversification if you want to diversify some of your wealth, get some of it out of your home country, wherever that may be. It's also a potential future income stream. At some point in the future, you could rent it out and create an income stream into retirement. And speaking of retirement, let's say you want to retire to Mexico. Owning a property here is going to lower your cost of retirement and get rid of that monthly rental payment that you might otherwise have. Can buying property here be stupid? Yes, there's some stupid mistakes you can make, and I hope in this video I'll educate you a little bit so you can steer yourself away from making those mistakes that others have. Now let's tackle that other super popular comment on that video. And there were literally hundreds of Mexicans saying, it's illegal for foreigners to own property here. It's in our Constitution. And some even went as far to say, you deserve to have it stolen from you because you aren't allowed to own it anyway. And while there is a grain of truth to that, it's a myth. Foreigners can own property in Mexico, but there are some things you need to know about this. There's a restricted zone, and the restricted zone is within 50 kilometers of the ocean or 100 kilometers of the border. And there's a lot of popular places that people want to buy property inside these restricted zones. Lots of people want a home in Mexico by the beach, whether that's Puerto Vallarta or Cancun or Playa del Carmen or one of many other places. In reality, the restricted zone is a pretty small part of the country. That leaves most of the rest of the country, and as a foreigner, you can own the title outright in those other parts. So how can you purchase in the restricted zone as a foreigner? Aside from becoming a Mexican citizen, which is technically an option, you can either A, buy it through a land trust, or B, buy it through a Mexican corporation. A land trust has its pros and cons. The biggest con is the price. It's gonna run you somewhere between $300 and $800 a year. However, it's a trust, so it's really great for estate planning. And also, if you're ever going to sell the property in the future, under current Mexican law, there is a capital gains exemption for your personal property. And if you own your property through a land trust and you sell it, well, then you may be exempt from much of those capital gains that you would otherwise owe. The second popular way to buy a property in the restricted zone is through a Mexican corporation. So you would start a Mexican corporation and it can be 100% owned by foreigners. However, one of the big downsides to owning it through a corporation is there's corporate records you have to keep up, and if it's anything like having a corporation in the US, well then you have to have your corporate book, you do your annual meetings, things like that. One big benefit of owning it through a corporation is that you don't have to pay that annual fee that the land trust has. Alaska, you've got to stop clicking. If you're going to be clicking, you've got to make an appearance. Okay, what's next? Do you want to share the next one? If you're finding this video helpful, please subscribe to our channel because we'll be putting more videos out like this in the future. And stick around until the end because I'm going to be sharing some things that you need to know if you're interested in buying a place here in Mexico. If you take only one thing away from this video, let it be this. There are 1,000,001 ways to get screwed over buying property in Mexico. However, using a lawyer will help avoid almost every single one of those problems. When we were looking into buying a condo in the state of Yucatan, I asked in some Facebook groups for some recommendations of an attorney that worked with real estate. And what people said, the most common answer, 9 out of 10 people said, what you need is a notary. And while a notary is part of the process, get yourself an attorney to advocate for you in addition to the notary, because they're going to be doing the due diligence. They're going to be looking at the environmental studies, the construction permits, everything to do with taxes and liens and all kinds of stuff that you would never even think about. You will probably get the advice, like I did when I went asking for an attorney, to find a notary. If nothing else, at least get the consultation from an attorney so you know what risks you're at if you don't end up hiring one. So what's a lawyer going to help you with in a real estate transaction here in Mexico? Well, there is no such thing as title insurance here. So they're going to be looking for all sorts of red flags. They're going to be doing tons of research into the history of the title, what the sales processes were like before when it had been sold in the past. Are there any red flags there? If the property you want to buy is currently under construction or one that's not built yet, they're going to be looking at the public filings of that, making sure it's legit, that it's not a scam, that they have all of the proper construction permits, that they've done the environmental studies that need to be done. All sorts of things that you would never even think about. So what else is a lawyer going to do? They're going to make sure that all the taxes are up to date, that the property taxes have been paid, that all the bills have been paid, like the water bill, the electricity bill, and so on. And speaking of the electricity bill, they're also going to be looking for red flags in that. Is it a house that's normally going to have an electric bill of 1,000 pesos a month, but their electric bills have been 10,000 pesos a month? If so, that might be a sign that either, hey, you need some major electrical work done on this house, or you need to be ready to pay that extra $450 per electric billing period as long as you own the house. One big thing a lawyer is going to do for you is they're going to make sure you're not buying ejido land. What is ejido land? A while back, to make sure all of the peasants and farmers could continue living off the land like they had been, they designated a lot of areas across Mexico as ejido land. It's kind of like communal land, and the members of that area have the right to operate that land. And sometimes this ejido land comes up for sale and it looks like a really great deal, but there are so many ways you can get screwed buying ejido land that more often than not a lawyer will just tell you, do not touch it. If you're like, no, it's too great of a deal, I need to move forward with it, do not do it without help, without the help of someone who specializes in transactions like this. Because there is a way that it can be done, but the person really, really has to know what they're doing. The lawyer is also going to look at the deed and make sure it's legit, because something that happens here is people forge deeds. They are trying to sell property that they don't actually have the legal authority to sell. Another one of the 1,000,001 examples of ways you get screwed over in Mexico is you're buying a place that was recently built, and the builder of that didn't properly register that and pay all the necessary employment taxes and whatnot. That could fall on you, the buyer of that house, as much as 5 years later. So let's say you buy a place for $150,000. It could be 5 years later, you all of a sudden are in a fight with the tax authorities and they're telling you that you owe $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 because the builder of the property didn't properly register and pay various taxes. Something else you need to look out for. If you're buying it through a trust, sometimes the trust companies have clauses in there saying that you can't rent out the properties. And in that case, the lawyer is probably going to recommend another trust company to go with that doesn't have that clause in there. I could continue with example after example of what a lawyer is going to do for you in a real estate transaction in Mexico, and other examples of how people got screwed over, how people got their property stolen from them. But my point is, get a lawyer, because 99 out of the 100 problems you're going to run into buying property in Mexico could have been avoided if you hire a lawyer to do all this due diligence for you. Aside from all the legal stuff, what are some tips that I have for you as someone who's been living in Mexico, who's rented in a lot of places, who's seen a lot of what Mexican culture is like and talked to a lot of people who have built homes, who have bought homes and things like that? Well, one thing I would say is if I'm buying a home, I would be paying attention to what's around there. Is there open space? Is there things that are going to be turned into lots and sold? Because there aren't a lot of zoning laws in Mexico. So you might be buying a home in what you think is a residential area, and then the person who ends up buying the lot next to you builds a machine shop or an auto repair shop, and then you have all kinds of noise, and not only does it like ruin the place for you, it also destroys your property value. So if I were looking into buying a place, I'd be trying to buy the land around it too, so that couldn't happen. Another thing is, well, buying land and having a home built sounds pretty appealing because then I get to choose exactly what the home is going to look like, and I can make it just how I like it. Well, in the conversations I've had with people who have built homes, it's a total nightmare. Dealing with contractors is awful in the US, but from what I hear in Mexico, it's 10 times worse. So I would avoid building my own home at all costs, unless I had the skills to do it myself and I had the skills to supervise it myself and was willing to invest the time into doing that. So those are just a couple tips I have from you from personal experience, but I also have some other important things to share with you, some things that you should know. In this video, I've talked about a notary. And while becoming a notary is a pretty simple process in the United States, in Mexico, it's actually quite difficult to become a notary. Notaries here are lawyers, and they have to be of a certain age, and they have to be something like appointed by the governor, and they have to be Mexican, so no foreigners can be notaries. Every real estate transaction is done through a notary. So if you go in a Facebook group and you're talking about buying a home, people will tell you to get a notary. Well, you do need a notary. That's a part of the transaction you cannot avoid. But don't think that's a replacement for getting a lawyer who's going to advocate for you and do due diligence for you. And that's another point I want to drive home. If you take away one thing from this video, let it be that if you're going to buy property in Mexico, don't trust the real estate agent to do everything. Don't trust the notary to do everything. Get a lawyer to do due diligence for you. There's a good chance that it's going to save you major headaches down the line. Something else you need to know about buying property in Mexico is that closing costs are quite high. The closing costs can be about 5% of the purchase price. But on the other hand, property taxes here are absurdly low. If you're buying a property for $100,000, your property taxes are probably going to be just over $100 a year. If you're buying a property for $500,000, your property taxes will probably be somewhere around $550 a year. So way, way cheaper than property taxes anywhere in the US. And something else you should know about buying property in Mexico is that most transactions here, at least those with foreigners, are done with cash. Not a large percentage of real estate transactions are financed here, and that's for a few reasons. It's harder to qualify here. You need a bigger down payment. Interest rates are higher. Also, closing costs on the loan, and there's extra fees involved with the loan. So due to the expense and the difficulty of getting a loan, people are usually paying cash when they buy a home here. On the screen here is that video I mentioned earlier, Why Expats Leave Mexico. I highly recommend you watch it if you haven't seen it yet. Please subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for Saturday's video, which is Maddie's first solo video. But one more thing.
Gong that bell so you get notified the next time I release a new video, and we'll see you there.